The story begins in a consultation office where Kashiwagi reviews the profile of a seated client named Ueno. At 33, she has spent 5 years using marriage agencies and now wants confirmation that she can find a good partner here. The advisor closes the folder and agrees to help, but first asks if she is truly serious about getting married. She responds with only a quiet, mysterious smile. Statistics prove that many people in Japan remain unmarried as traditional ideas about marriage fade. Kashiwagi works as a professional advisor, helping men and women navigate the challenging world of modern dating. Ueno affirms her dedication, noting the high fees she has paid over the past 5 years. Meanwhile, a new female employee waits outside the building, trembling with excitement for her first day. She sees the job idealistically, eager to help couples find happiness. Ignoring the skeptical whispers of passing men who mistake the agency for a cult, she steps inside, looking for her senior mentor. Hearing a voice declare a desire to marry, the new hire peeks into a nearby room and recognizes Kashiwagi. However, the interaction immediately shatters her expectations. The advisor bluntly asks Ueno why she is so heavy. When the client reacts angrily at the insult, he coldly mentions her height and weight, asserting that her refusal to address her physical health proves that she's not serious about marriage. As Ueno breaks down in tears, the eavesdropping employee is horrified by his rudeness and lack of empathy. Unfazed, Kashiwagi explains that obesity is a severe handicap in this arena. The client tries to explain her lack of success by blaming her freelance job and low income, but he quickly shuts her down. He points out that many wealthy men actually prefer housewives, and her age is still suitable for having children. Her money isn't the issue. Kashiwagi frames the process not as romance, but as a business governed by supply and demand. He identifies her physique as an irrational element that has prevented her from being chosen for 5 years. Trying to shift the topic, Ueno suggests acquiring a new professional qualification. The advisor accepts the change, but questions her ability to follow through. When she complains that her part-time job leaves her too exhausted to study, he dismisses the excuse as her simply spoiling herself. Kashiwagi presses further, suggesting that her excessive fatigue is a direct result of her obesity. Overwhelmed by the harsh reality, Ueno bursts into tears, calls him cruel, and attempts to flee the consultation room. The advisor tries to stop her, warning that running away and making excuses now will only lead to deep regret in her 40s and 50s. He insists he wants to spare her that pain, but she ignores him and exits the building. Watching her disappear down the road, Kashiwagi wonders why the truth angers people. Suddenly, a new voice predicts that the woman will certainly not return. The new employee, Yuna, enters the room. Kashiwagi introduces himself but immediately intimidates her, declaring his intense hatred for irrationality. He insists that a marriage agency should operate on pure logic and expresses frustration at the unpredictability of human behavior. Yuna pushes back, arguing that logic is not everything, and that their job involves connecting people through the thread of fate, which requires sensitivity to feelings. Kashiwagi coldly shuts this down, stating that destiny does not exist. He says marriage is just a transaction to continue the human species. If the couple's goals don't match, divorce will happen. When Yuna shouts that he is destroying dreams, he counters that marriage is reality, not a dream. Internally, she decides she hates him, fearing he is ruining her idealized image of the profession. The tension eases when the agency's president, a striking woman, enters and remarks on the lively scene. Yuna feels relieved, thinking someone reasonable has arrived, but her relief fades quickly. The president immediately flirts with Kashiwagi, complaining that he is the only man she cannot charm. Kashiwagi firmly rejects her behavior, asking her to stop harassing her employee. Yuna watches in despair, realizing there are no normal people in this office. Shifting to business, Kashiwagi formally introduces the recruit. The president greets Yuna warmly, but immediately assigns her training to a subordinate. She quizzes the newcomer on the average success rate of marriage agencies. Yuna optimistically guesses 40%, but the boss reveals the grim reality. The average is only 10%. However, she notes that Kashiwagi holds an astounding 90% track record. The president praises his excellence, though Yuna questions how such a rude man could be so successful. The boss explains that he does what formal advisors refuse to do. Kashiwagi references the earlier client, asking Yuna if she found it strange that no one had ever mentioned the woman's weight before. Yuna admits it is odd that, despite the obvious hurdles to her marriage hunt, no one spoke up. He discloses that 9 times out of 10, advisors hide the real reasons for rejection because they are being paid. Just as a friend struggles to tell another friend to lose weight, agencies fear offending clients and losing business. They prioritize membership fees over actual marriage, even if it means the client never succeeds. The president agrees, reminding them that it is a business after all. Hearing this, Yuna is struck by the cold but effective logic, finding it surprisingly impressive. Kashiwagi confirms that he pursues actual marital success thoroughly, even if it means being hated by members. Yuna listens silently, recognizing that despite his personality, he is a true professional, while the president resumes her playful teasing of the serious advisor. The following day, Ueno returns to her job as a receptionist at a mart, but her mood is dark. She dwells on Kashiwagi's harsh assessment of her irrational body shape and considers switching to a gentler agency. Her self-esteem takes another hit when a male customer ignores her register to line up elsewhere, and a coworker suggests she move to stocking shelves to stay out of sight. On her walk home, the humiliation escalates. A passerby shouts at her to move, calling her a fatty, causing her to stumble and fall. Two young boys witness the accident and mock her struggle, treating her pain like a game. Lying on the ground, she recalls the convenient, kind words people used to say, that she was healing or had soft skin, and realizes those were comforting lies. Kashiwagi was the only one honest enough to ask if she would regret her life choices. Staring at her tearful reflection, she wonders if she can actually change. A week passes. Yuna wakes up convinced the client will never return after such verbal abuse. However, upon arriving at the office, she is shocked to find Ueno already there. Kashiwagi calmly notes that he predicted her return, proving he understands human nature better than anyone. Thus begins her transformation. Ueno Eiko commits to a strict regimen of healthy eating and exercise. As the weeks go by, Kashiwagi encourages her, predicting that once she drops below 70 kilograms, suitors will appear. Eventually, the scale hits 69 kilograms. She is ecstatic, celebrating a weight she hasn't seen in ages. Even at work, her demeanor improves, prompting her manager to ask if she is okay, concerned that the sudden weight loss implies illness. She returns to the agency, where Kashiwagi triumphantly announces that a marriage interview request has finally arrived. Surprisingly, Ueno looks down and asks to decline it. Before he can scold her for being picky, she reveals the reason. She is getting married to her boss. The manager steps up behind her to confirm she is withdrawing from the agency. Kashiwagi screams in sheer shock at the unexpected development. Later, the president sips her coffee and says this counts as a failure, lowering Kashiwagi's 90% success rate. He calmly accepts it, saying that since the client got what she wanted, it's still a good outcome. Yuna is impressed, seeing that he truly cares about the client's happiness, even if it means losing money for the agency. Work goes on, and a new client arrives, a 52-year-old man demanding a wife in her 20s to bear 3 children. Yuna is shocked by the impossible request, but Kashiwagi leans in and asks, "May I ask one thing? Do you really want to get married?" Yuna smiles, realizing that helping clients like this is the true heart of being a marriage advisor. A few months into her job at the marriage agency, Yuna settles into the routine of studying while assisting her supervisor. Today, Kashiwagi announces it is time for an initial appointment. This free 1 to 2 hour consultation is critical for convincing potential customers to join by listening to their needs. Yuna welcomes the new client, Meguro, a 52-year-old man. When Kashiwagi asks for his conditions, Meguro admits that at his age, he is not in a position to be demanding. However, he insists on one non-negotiable requirement. He wants 3 children, so his wife must be in her 20s. Yuna is shocked by the audacity, but Kashiwagi is immediate and ruthless. He dismisses the request as impossible and orders the man to stop talking about dreams and face reality. Meguro demands to know why it is impossible. Kashiwagi bluntly explains that there is zero merit for a woman in her 20s to marry him. He breaks down the timeline. If Meguro marries in a year and has children every 2 years, he will be a late-stage elderly person in his 60s before the youngest child even enters high school. The client argues that a young wife can simply work hard to support them. Kashiwagi is appalled, asking why a young woman would sign up to support a family of 4 on a single income with an elderly husband. Meguro tries to take the moral high ground, arguing that marriage isn't about profit and loss, but about finding someone who respects him as a human being. Kashiwagi counters that marriage is exactly a transaction where both parties must benefit. Since Meguro is proposing a scenario where only he benefits, the request is irrational. Trying to mediate, Yuna suggests looking at women in their 40s, pointing out a profile of a wonderful person. Meguro scoffs, declaring that while he prefers fresh college graduates, he is generously compromising to women in their late 20s. He rudely warns them not to introduce any aunties over 35 since he is paying good money. Yuna is so enraged by his arrogance that she snaps her pen in half, but Meguro ignores her, sliding through the tablet to select young girls. He decides to apply to the 20-year-olds immediately. Kashiwagi advises against it, warning that large age gaps result in low match rates and wasted time. When the client insists, Kashiwagi explains a harsh truth. Unlike dating apps where every like reaches the user, marriage agencies carefully screen applications. If an older man applies to much younger women, the agency blocks the application to protect the women from unwanted attention. Meguro is offended and asks why an interested man is considered a burden. Kashiwagi explains a basic gender difference. Men may feel happy being liked even by someone not their type, thinking the attraction could grow over time. Women, however, often react differently. He points out that while a man might feel flattered by attention, a young woman often feels fear or discomfort when an older, unfamiliar man fixates on her. This can lead to a problem called the geezer attack, where young female members lose confidence, wondering if they are unattractive to men their own age. To prevent this, the agency uses a geezer blocker to filter out these mismatched applications before the women ever see them. Offended by the idea that his interest causes pain, Meguro stands up, declaring he will find an agency that doesn't use such blockers. He attempts to storm out, but Kashiwagi stops him with a weary sigh. The advisor asks once more if he truly wants to get married. Meguro sits back down, confirming his desire. Kashiwagi presses him on the logic of starting a family of 3 children after age 50, implying that a serious person would have begun decades ago. Meguro tries to argue that people can change their minds. But Kashiwagi notices a hint of determination. He gives Meguro the contract, accepting him as a member, but warns him that the path ahead will be difficult. After the client leaves, Yuna collapses in the break room, exhausted by the encounter. She slams her coffee down, dismissing Meguro as a monster who just wants romance with a young girl. Kashiwagi calmly corrects her. The desire for youth is an unshakable value for men paying high fees, a natural biological instinct. The problem is not the desire itself, but Meguro's inability to objectively view his own low market value. When Yuna calls the man hopeless, Kashiwagi reminds her that their job would be meaningless if they only helped those guaranteed to succeed. On her commute home, Yuna reflects on the meeting. She overhears young women on the train complaining that even dating apps are too much of a hassle. This triggers a realization. Unlike lazy girls, and unlike herself, who spends days off scrolling online, Meguro got up early, dressed properly, and went to the agency to work for his future. She realizes that, even if he's a bit delusional, his dedication shows real effort, and she needs to take her job just as seriously. Meanwhile, Meguro heads home, his confirmation bias in full effect. He spots an age gap couple on the street, fueling his belief that the agency is lying to him and simply trying to rip him off. He returns to a dark, empty apartment. Taking off his shirt to avoid staining it, he eats instant noodles alone in the silence. He gets bored and annoyed while flipping through a magazine, and eventually yells at a buzzing fly, a sad way to release the loneliness that fills his life. The next day at the office, Kashiwagi offers a strange, backhanded compliment to the client, telling him he should be grateful he is human. Meguro sits in confused silence as the advisor explains that the world of fruit flies is far more severe than our own. Yuna is equally baffled, asking for clarification. Kashiwagi elaborates that in nature, only the most excellent mates are chosen. Translating this to human terms, a high-spec male in his 20s with an annual income over 9 million yen dominates the field. If Meguro were a fruit fly, aged 52 with a modest income of 4 million yen, he would not just be ignored by females, he would be physically crushed by the competition. Meguro is horrified by the brutal comparison, shouting that it sounds cruel and asking if he should simply give up on marriage. Kashiwagi calmly corrects him, noting that the saving grace is his humanity. Unlike insects, the purpose of human marriage is not solely reproduction. Later, Meguro sits alone on a park bench, hopeless as he clutches the contract papers. He replays the advisor's words, wondering what he should do. Yuna spots him while walking by and decides to sit next to him. As he questions his own worth, a small toddler suddenly wanders over to them. Yuna immediately jumps up to find the guardian, handing the child to Meguro and asking him to watch the boy for a moment. Meguro panics, admitting he has never babysat before. The energetic child immediately bolts, forcing the older man to sprint after him, shouting for him to wait. By the time Yuna returns with the mother, Meguro is kneeling on the ground, completely exhausted. Yuna observes his exhaustion, noting that her cousin recently had a second child and it is a battle of physical stamina. She warns him that if he plans to have 3 kids, he needs to be prepared for this level of exertion daily. The physical reality hits Meguro hard. He suddenly admits that perhaps he does not need children after all. Yuna is shocked, reminding him that he was obsessed with the idea. He reflects on Kashiwagi's earlier advice, that marriage is about more than just biology. Curious, Yuna asks why he decided to hunt for marriage in the first place, if not for children. Meguro thinks back to a specific event 3 months ago. At the funeral of a college classmate who died of colon cancer, the reality of his age struck him. He heard whispers about the deceased being young, leading Meguro to fear his own mortality. He realized that once his parents passed, he would have no one to mourn him. At that same funeral, he met an old friend who shared a terrifying story about a senior colleague who collapsed while living alone and wasn't found for a week. The fear of a lonely death terrified both men. They made a pact to start marriage hunting immediately to avoid such a fate. One day, Meguro received a message from that same friend attached with a photo. The friend had successfully married a former female classmate, leaving Meguro behind to face his loneliness alone. Meguro connects the dots. Both his friend and the female classmate were at the funeral. He realizes they must have used the somber occasion as a meeting place to rekindle their connection. Feeling outsmarted by a peer he considered an equal, he clenches his teeth in frustration. To soothe his bruised ego, he mentally dismisses the friend's new wife as a fat old lady, convincing himself he is not jealous. Instead, he vows to win by finding someone better, specifically an exceptionally young bride, reasoning that his money gives him the upper hand in a marriage agency. Back in the present, he lowers his head, admitting the foolishness of his past logic. He confesses that his original motivation was simply the fear of dying alone, but he allowed jealousy to distort his path. Kashiwagi correctly deduces that the client's obsession with a young wife was merely a desperate attempt to stage a comeback and wipe away his inferiority complex. The advisor asks the fundamental question one last time: "Do you want to get married?" This time, the answer is different. Meguro drops the demands and quietly replies, "Yes." He admits that even if he cannot have children, he just wants someone to walk through life with him. Yuna smiles, touched by his honesty, but Meguro quickly loses confidence again, muttering that no one would want to marry a man like him. Kashiwagi intervenes immediately to stop the self-pity. He tells Meguro that recognizing his true objective is a wonderful thing, a realization that many struggling clients never reach. He assures the man that he is finally being rational. Kashiwagi extends a hand, and an emotional Meguro shakes it firmly, pledging to do his best. Yuna watches with joy, noting that the relationship between advisor and client finally looks perfect as Meguro exits the office, ready to start for real. Yuna arrives at the office drenched in sweat, overwhelmed by the sweltering heat. She marvels at Kashiwagi, who sits in his usual suit, looking completely unaffected by the temperature. He warns her to pull herself together because work is about to get busy. Yuna is puzzled, asking if marriage agencies actually have busy seasons. Kashiwagi explains that while there isn't a specific season, enrollment spikes predictably after major holidays, Christmas, Golden Week, and right after Obon. Yuna checks the calendar and realizes they are in the middle of the post-Obon rush. She asks why enrollment increases at these times, but instead of answering directly, Kashiwagi looks out the window. Down on the street, an anxious young woman is pacing back and forth, crouching down in fear. Kashiwagi goes down and startles her, effectively forcing her to come inside. Now seated in the office, the timid woman introduces herself as Misato Takanawa. She explains that during her recent visit home for the holiday, her mother nagged her relentlessly, claiming she would never get married unless she used a matchmaking agency. Yuna realizes the pattern. People go home for the holidays, get pressured by their families, and immediately sign up upon returning. Kashiwagi hands Misato the enrollment checklist. It is an exhausting list of requirements: graduation certificates, proof of income, tax withholding slips, proof of enrollment, eligibility certifications, national qualifications, ID, and a certificate of residence. Yuna laughs nervously at the sheer volume of paperwork, while Misato looks terrified, wondering if she can actually gather it all. The next day, Misato returns with a stack of papers, but the submission fails immediately. Yuna points out that her certificate of residence is missing. Misato panics, searching her bag and realizing she left it at home, hoping the address on her insurance card is enough. Yuna rejects it. Kashiwagi adds that she is also missing the certificate of single status, an official document proving she is currently unmarried. Misato is baffled, arguing that she clearly looks single and questioning why such a document is necessary. Kashiwagi ignores the complaint and notes she is also missing her college graduation certificate. Misato looks ready to snap, complaining that the process is too difficult just to join. Kashiwagi challenges her, asking if she is actually serious about marriage. He explains that being earnest means sparing no effort. He argues that the regular dating market is filled with people who have no intention of marrying, which makes dating them a waste of time and highly irrational. However, the agency requires this difficult paperwork to act as a filter. Anyone standing in this office has gone through the trouble of gathering these documents, proving they are dead serious. Understanding the logic, Misato gets back to work. She successfully obtains her proof of single status, leaving only the graduation certificate. Since she hasn't been back to her university since graduating, she heads to the campus. While walking through the grounds, she runs into Professor Oyama, who recognizes her and greets her, noting that it has been a long time. Professor Oyama approaches her, noting that it is rare to see her on campus and asking if she has business with someone. Misato hesitates before explaining that she came to collect her graduation certificate. The professor assumes she is changing jobs, but when she denies it, he offers a thoughtful observation. Retrieving such a document usually signifies a major step that will change the course of one's life. His words resonate deeply with Misato, causing her to blush as she realizes the magnitude of her decision. Later, sitting in a park with the certificate in hand, she reflects on the process. Gathering these documents feels like compiling a resume of her entire existence. She recalls Kashiwagi's lecture about standing in a place reserved for the serious. She finally accepts that since marriage is a lifelong partnership, it would be rude to hide her history. She resolves to be fully transparent. The next day, Misato returns to the agency with the complete set of documents. Yuna checks the file and excitedly congratulates her on gathering everything. However, when Yuna turns to Kashiwagi for the next steps, the advisor makes a surprising decision. He refuses to take the lead, instead assigning Misato's case entirely to Yuna. She is stunned to be given such responsibility, while Kashiwagi maintains his usual stoic expression. Recovering quickly, the assistant beams with enthusiasm, promising to do her best. Misato agrees, looking forward to working with her. They immediately begin creating her profile. When Yuna asks about a photograph, Misato confidently produces one she brought from home, claiming it turned out really well. Yuna accepts it with high expectations, but her smile freezes upon seeing the image. The photo features Misato with a dark, lifeless expression, looking more like a criminal mugshot than a potential bride. Suppressing her shock, Yuna gently suggests they retake the picture immediately. The next morning, Yuna meets Misato on the street and compliments her outfit. The client admits that the dress she is wearing is the only girly one she owns. Yuna confirms they are heading for the profile photoshoot. When Misato questions whether going to a professional studio is necessary, Yuna explains that the number of matchmaking requests depends heavily on the quality of a single profile photo. Misato feels relieved, finding the assistant much more approachable than the intimidating Kashiwagi. However, Yuna suddenly breaks the calm by nervously reciting facts about the studio's affiliation and the 10% member discount, clearly struggling to remember her training. Internally, she panics as her memorized script disappears from her mind. Seeing Yuna so flustered, Misato begins to worry whether she will be okay. Upon entering the studio, they are greeted not by the photographer, but by the agency's president. She immediately critiques Misato's outfit, appalled that she plans to wear it. Declaring it a waste to hide her beautiful body, the boss rejects Yuna's defense of the dress. Instead, she holds up a revealing sleeveless option and orders the client to change. Misato hesitates, embarrassed to show her bare arms. The president silences her complaint and forces Yuna, who tries to intervene regarding privacy, to step back. She shows Misato samples of other female members' photos. Flipping through the portfolio, Misato realizes that in every successful photo, the women expose their arms. The president explains the psychology. Humans are instinctively drawn to skin and body lines. She emphasizes that data matching is a battlefield where one must stand out. When Misato asks for clarification, the boss details the two methods of finding a partner. The first is a traditional introduction by a matchmaker. The second is data matching, where members use an app to search for partners themselves. She compares the app to a mail order catalog, where men browse categories comparing potential partners. With tens of thousands of female members, the president warns that a modest dress will make Misato invisible. No matter how good the raw material is, it is pointless if she fails to catch anyone's eye. The president declares that the battle has begun and urges Misato to use her weapon. Initially confused, Misato recalls her college classmates wondering why she hid her figure under loose clothing despite having a great body. Realizing her appearance is indeed an asset, she follows instructions, changes into the sleeveless top, and removes her glasses. The transformation is so striking that even Yuna is left speechless. Satisfied that her intuition was correct, the president orders the photographer to begin. However, Misato freezes in front of the lens, her expression stiff and awkward, making a natural smile impossible. Realizing the client is struggling, Yuna decides she must intervene. In a desperate attempt to loosen the tension, she performs a clumsy, impromptu show. The performance is objectively terrible and fails to make anyone laugh, leaving Yuna mortified. Yet Misato watches Yuna's flustered efforts and feels a wave of warmth. She realizes that although Yuna seemed unreliable, she is willing to embarrass herself to help. Touched by this dedication, Misato naturally blushes and breaks into a genuine, soft smile. The president captures the perfect moment immediately. Back at the office, the president boasts about her photography skills while Yuna finalizes the profile. Once she hits publish, a notification chimes. Misato has received a request for a meeting. Yuna is thrilled, and soon dozens of requests flood the inbox. She calls Misato to share the news. The client is stunned that applications pour in the moment her profile goes public, but her anxiety quickly shifts toward the upcoming meetings. Later, the office quiets down. Kashiwagi notices Yuna sitting silently, looking dejected. When he asks about her mood, she admits to feeling useless, comparing herself negatively to him, lacking his directness, and to the president, lacking her persuasive techniques. Kashiwagi gently corrects her self-assessment. He points out that, given Misato's severe stage fright, it is remarkable she was able to relax enough to smile in the photo. He correctly deduces that it was Yuna who brought out that expression. Surprised and touched by the rare compliment, Yuna turns to her puppets for comfort, playfully bickering with them to hide her embarrassment. Kashiwagi watches the odd display with confusion, asking what she is doing, but she simply asks to be left alone to savor the small victory. A new customer arrives at the agency with an attitude of high superiority. Flipping through the binder of male profiles, she scoffs that not a single one meets her standards, demanding someone she can enjoy champagne with at a club in Roppongi. Her haughty demeanor surprises both Yuna and Kashiwagi. The woman, Yumi Otsuka, introduces herself as a former flight attendant and declares that the current options are not flashy enough for a woman of her level. Yuna asks for clarification on what constitutes charismatic. Yumi lays out her specific demands: a handsome man, preferably younger than her, earning over 10 million yen annually. She claims that because she has associated with high-level men in both her work and private life, she cannot settle for less. Kashiwagi calmly notes that men earning over 10 million yen are typically found in their late 40s. Yumi immediately rejects this, refusing to date an old man. The advisor reviews her data. Yumi is 38 years old, currently working as a temp at an insurance company with an annual income of 3 million yen. When she condescendingly asks how many members the agency even has, Kashiwagi answers that they have 90 in-house. Yumi is appalled by the low number, accusing them of trying to force a match within a small pool. Kashiwagi clarifies that they are connected to a federation of over 4,000 agencies, giving them access to approximately 100,000 men. Hearing the massive number, Yumi gets excited, assuming there must be tons of high-spec men among them. Kashiwagi confirms there are plenty, but then delivers a crushing blow. He refuses to introduce her to them because it would be a waste of time. Yumi is furious, but he explains the harsh reality. Young men earning over 10 million yen do not have women in their late 30s on their radar. Yumi shouts that she should not be lumped in with ordinary women, citing her status as a former flight attendant. Kashiwagi counters that the keyword is former. Currently, she is simply a 38-year-old temp worker with a modest income. Unable to handle the truth, Yumi storms out of the office, brushing past the president in the corridor. She watches the client leave, sighing that she is a typical marriage-hunting refugee, a sufferer of setting sights far too high. Yuna is confused, arguing that Yumi is beautiful and has a prestigious background, so she should be popular. To explain, the president shows Yuna the search interface on a tablet. In the list of female profiles, Yumi's entry is visible. However, her former flight attendant history is hidden in the extended bio. The basic preview only displays 38-year-old office worker, income 3 million. The president explains that high-spec men filter their searches by age first. Because they set the limit to younger women, they never even click on Yumi's profile to see her backstory or photos. She is eliminated by the algorithm before the competition even begins. The president tries to remain calm, though she becomes defensive as she is the same age as the rejected client. She playfully harasses Kashiwagi, trying to prove that a 38-year-old can still be attractive. He ignores the antics and repeats the cold logic. Alpha males in their 20s and 30s will always prioritize women in their 20s. The strong do not go out of their way to choose the weak. Yuna argues that it's 2025 and such stereotypes should be outdated, but Kashiwagi insists that no matter the year, 2025 or 2100, biological reality doesn't change. Leaving the agency in a rage, Yumi curses Kashiwagi for his apparent ignorance. She indignantly reminds herself that she was once proposed to by a pilot, validating her self-worth. She considers quitting on the spot, but the sunk cost of the 150,000 yen initial fee holds her back. Reluctantly, she decides she has no choice but to try to make it work with the agency for now. However, her resolve is tested the next morning at her own workplace. Yumi notices her female colleagues gossiping and learns that a co-worker named Togoshi is getting married. When shown a photo of the fiancé, Yumi is surprised to see he is genuinely attractive. Togoshi reveals they met through a matchmaking app. The other girls chime in, noting that 1 in 3 couples now meet through apps, normalizing the method. Yumi's perception shifts. Previously, she viewed apps as scary or low class, but seeing a normal, successful couple changes her mind. Her colleagues feed her ego, suggesting that if a plain girl like Togoshi could find someone, a beauty like Yumi would have her pick of the crop. That evening, Yumi decides to test the theory. She reasons that if she applies her charms, landing a hot guy should be effortless. She registers her profile and almost instantly receives a match notification. Opening the profile, she is ecstatic to see a handsome man working at a trading company with an annual income of 15 million yen. The match feels like immediate vindication. Yumi gloats, convinced that Kashiwagi was fundamentally wrong about her market value. Back at the agency, Yuna notes that Yumi has been silent since the argument. Kashiwagi sighs, accurately predicting that the client has likely lost her patience and turned to matchmaking apps. Yuna asks if he is worried she might encounter men only interested in physical relationships. He corrects her, explaining that this is not the worst-case scenario. The real danger is that receiving flattering attention from high-status men could give her a false sense of confidence, ensuring her marriage hunt reaches a permanent dead end. Kashiwagi's prediction proves terrifyingly accurate. Yumi stays with Ryosuke, the handsome 30-year-old trading company employee she matched with. He treats her kindly, showing charm and consideration, and makes sure she's comfortable. She is ecstatic, saying she has never felt this happy before. When they discuss their next day off, Yumi suggests visiting the National Art Center for a Monet exhibition. Ryosuke praises her sophistication, claiming she doesn't look 38 at all and that he expects nothing less from a former flight attendant. Yumi is completely swept off her feet. She marvels at how charming and attentive he seems, wondering if someone like him could really be real. Convinced she is destined to marry him, she dismisses the expensive marriage agency as a scam for fools. Soon after, Yuna receives a call from the client stating she wants to withdraw. Kashiwagi asks if this means she is getting married. Yuna clarifies that she isn't at that stage yet, but wants to quit. Kashiwagi advises listing her as on leave instead, knowing she will likely return. Yuna asks for clarification on his previous warning about the dead end. Kashiwagi explains the structural pitfall of matching apps. He notes that women often mistake romantic demand for marriage demand. Because they get attention from high-spec men looking for short-term flirtation, they fail to realize they are aiming too high for a long-term partner, turning their search into a hopeless mess. Oblivious to this, Yumi arrives at work radiating such happiness that her co-workers immediately notice. When asked if she went on a date, Yumi hints that Ryosuke has something important to tell her that evening. Her friends tease her, suggesting it might be a proposal, which sends her excitement through the roof. However, the night ends in disaster. Instead of a ring, Ryosuke drops a sudden bombshell. He has been transferred to Brazil. He suggests they take a break due to the distance. Yumi is shattered. Later, crying in a bar, her friend tries to comfort her, telling her it couldn't be helped and that she will find someone else. Trying to compose herself, Yumi goes to the restroom. She checks her makeup, giving herself a pep talk that the transfer wasn't her fault and that plenty of men still want her. But as she exits the restroom, she freezes. Ryosuke is sitting at a nearby table with a male friend, clearly not in Brazil. She overhears the friend asking about the older girlfriend. Ryosuke laughs, admitting he cut her off with a fake transfer story because he needs to start looking for a serious marriage partner soon. When the friend asks why he bothered dating someone he had no intention of marrying, Ryosuke delivers a cruel justification. He admits he misled her, saying he wasn't thinking about a serious relationship and only dated her casually. Paranoia turns to rage. Yumi storms over, accusing him of lying. He confronts him, desperate to understand why he misled her and insisting their time together meant something. Ryosuke remains indifferent to her feelings, bluntly saying he never intended a long-term relationship with her. Broken by the reality check, Yumi walks through the streets as rain begins to pour. Drenched and miserable, she bursts back into the marriage agency office. She slams the door open, shouting that guys on dating apps are trash and demanding they introduce her to a man immediately. Defeated by the app experience, Yumi returns to the agency, though her attitude remains haughty. Kashiwagi presents her with a new list of recommended men. However, as Yumi scans the profiles, she begins to shout in disgust. The list contains men who are 48 years old with unknown incomes, or younger men with modest earnings of 3 to 5 million yen. She declares that the mere thought of marrying these men makes her sick, comparing them unfavorably to the handsome, high-earning Ryosuke she was just dating. When Kashiwagi asks why she didn't just marry the pilot who proposed to her in the past, a flash of trauma crosses Yumi's face, silencing her momentarily. Regaining her composure, she snaps that she has had enough of his recommendations. She demands to cancel the advisor-led option and switch entirely to data matching to search for a partner herself. Yuna confirms the change, and Yumi storms out, leaving the assistant worried about the client's stubbornness. Kashiwagi, however, advises Yuna to let her do as she pleases. Back at home, Yumi begins her independent search. She sets her filters to income over 10 million yen and under 35 years old. To her delight, the system shows tons of results. She scrolls through the high-spec options, convinced that Kashiwagi was hiding these good men from her. She aggressively applies to 20 different men. Her mother interrupts to tell her to take a bath, and Yumi sets her phone down, confident that she will be swamped with dates soon. However, the reality check is instant. By the time she finishes her shower, all 20 applications have been declined. The next day, Yumi bursts into the agency in a rage, demanding to know what is going on. She accuses Kashiwagi of harassment, believing he is personally blocking her applications. He calmly denies this, reiterating that applying to men out of her league is a waste of time. Furious, Yumi grabs Kashiwagi by his tie, screaming that she is out of their league because she was chosen by a high-spec man on the app. Kashiwagi delivers the cold, hard truth. She was chosen for a date, but she is not married. As he fixes his tie, he sighs and explains the brutal economics of modern dating. He compares dating apps to a supermarket food sample station. Shoppers will eat free samples even if they aren't hungry or particularly interested, simply because there is no cost. However, unless the product is exceptional, they will not actually buy it. People only pay money for things they find truly valuable. Kashiwagi explains that apps, which cost only a few thousand yen, are essentially all-you-can-eat venues. In an era where workplace romance is risky due to compliance laws, men flock to apps for string-free relationships. They use their high specs as a way to get women. Ladies like Yumi fall into the trap, mistaking this casual interest for genuine market value. They become unable to accept men who actually match their level, turning their search into a quagmire. He warns that if she continues this way, she will end up like other former members who do nothing but bash men on social media, stuck in a loop of frustration while time runs out. Yumi breaks down in tears, wailing that men are trash and her advisor is mean. She laments that she must be destined to be unhappy. Kashiwagi cuts through the self-pity, stating that destiny is just a word for people who have stopped thinking, an excuse to run away from problems. He asserts that, conversely, there is no destiny dictating she must be unhappy. Yumi falls silent, unable to argue with his logic. The following day, the president asks Yuna about the difficult client. She reports that Yumi has humbled herself and agreed to try the recommendation option again. The president is impressed by Kashiwagi's ability to retain the client. Inside the consultation room, the negotiation is underway. Yumi is once again demanding a man who is rich, handsome, and younger. Kashiwagi firmly tells her to pick just one. Yumi agonizes over the choice, thinking hard. Finally, she admits that she simply cannot handle old men. If the partner is younger, she feels she can figure out the rest. She chooses youth as her non-negotiable trait, taking the first real step toward a realistic match. The scene shifts to Yuna, who's in a panic. She shouts the terrible news. Meguro has suffered 50 consecutive losses, despite the 52-year-old gentleman's decision to turn over a new leaf and try his best. His application record is a complete failure since Yuna took over the case. Yuna cannot understand why he has been rejected 50 times in a row without a single meeting. Kashiwagi explains the mechanics of the agency. A meeting only happens if the other party accepts the application from the database. Being rejected 50 times before even meeting suggests the problem isn't the man himself, but his profile. He advises Yuna to consult Tachikawa, a staff member who specializes in these systems. When Yuna asks who that is, Kashiwagi warns her that Tachikawa is a unique character and to be careful. They visit the back office to find Tachikawa Azusa. She is typing away while eating potato chips. She explains to Yuna that she has to snack at work because if she eats at home, her 3 children will demand some. Yuna is charmed, thinking this remote working mother looks like an angel. Curious, Yuna asks Tachikawa her age, amazed that she has 3 kids. Tachikawa coyly replies that she is barely in her 20s. Yuna believes her, impressed by the young mom, but Kashiwagi interjects with a warning. If she digs too deep into a woman's age, she won't get off with just a broken finger. Yuna is confused, but Kashiwagi hints that the angel Tachikawa is dangerous when provoked. Getting to the main topic, they show Tachikawa the profile of Meguro. She reviews it and notes that the photo isn't bad. He has a nice smile. However, she declares the text a disaster. She points out that the matchmaker recommendation field is empty and asks if Yuna simply posted the client's self-written draft as is. Yuna admits she did. Kashiwagi scolds her, explaining that what the member writes is just a rough draft. The advisor's job is to fix it up and add a professional recommendation. Tachikawa reinforces this, stating that in the online system, the profile is the only material for judgment. Sending a member out with a raw draft is like sending a soldier into enemy territory without a weapon. Realizing her mistake has caused Meguro's failure, Yuna begins to cry. Tachikawa reassures her, promising to teach her how to create a shiny profile. Kashiwagi leaves them to it. Tachikawa begins the lesson with a simple rule: never write negative things about yourself. She explains that humble people like Meguro often focus only on their weaknesses when describing themselves. His original draft says he feels lonely, worries about the future, stays home on holidays, and wants an indoor partner. Yuna admits she would not want to meet someone based on that description. Tachikawa then rewrites the same information positively. Instead of sounding lonely and desperate, the new version says he values quiet time, but now wants to share his days with someone special, and that he enjoys a calm, home-centered lifestyle. Yuna is amazed. Nothing about the facts has changed. Meguro is still an indoor person looking for a partner, but the impression shifts completely. Instead of sounding sad and isolated, he now feels peaceful and sincere. Tachikawa continues, stating that even negative traits can be reframed with the right words. She casually mentions that this skill is useful in the Yakuza world too. She gives examples. Cowardly becomes sensitive, alcoholic becomes enjoys drinking with others, shy becomes warm once they open up, and easily depressed becomes empathetic toward others' pain. However, she warns that rephrasing only works for simple cases. The real trouble comes from clients who write long essays about themselves, detailing their life philosophy, past relationships, emotional trauma, and strict demands like replying within 30 minutes or splitting housework exactly in half. These profiles cannot be posted as is, but editing them often leads to angry complaints. Yuna understands the problem, and Tachikawa explains the psychology behind it. People who write these long texts lack imagination. They assume strangers want to read their entire life story and follow their rules. She bluntly says that people like this would fail in war due to poor awareness, and in modern life, they simply fail at marriage hunting. By contrast, Tachikawa notes that Meguro's short, self-critical profile suggests he is modest and serious. Yuna is impressed that she could tell so much from just a few lines of text. Now it is Yuna's turn to write the matchmaker recommendation. She struggles, unable to think of Meguro's strengths. Seeing her panic, Tachikawa stops her and offers a new way to think about the job. She compares matchmaking to raising a child. A parent cannot live life for their child, just as a matchmaker cannot go on dates for a client. Their role is to find hidden strengths and give enough encouragement for the person to move forward on their own. She tells Yuna to write with the care of a parent supporting their child. Moved by this advice, Yuna finally finds the words. She writes a sincere recommendation highlighting Meguro's honesty and seriousness. The result is immediate. After the profile is updated, Meguro finally gets a match. After work, Yuna walks home with Tachikawa, thanking her again and again. She thinks Tachikawa is truly an angel and wonders if Kashiwagi was wrong to call her dangerous. At that moment, a man walks past them, smoking in a crowded area. In an instant, the angel disappears. Tachikawa grabs the man by the neck and shouts in a terrifying, rough voice, demanding to know what he thinks he's doing. She throws him aside effortlessly. Yuna freezes in shock as Tachikawa immediately turns back, smiling sweetly and apologizing for the disturbance. In silence, Yuna vows never to make this woman her enemy.
Here I am, know it's been a while.